Hello, everyone. This is the dive jump. Today I'm alone without Mr. Hammer, but we're going to jump right into diving. Mr. Howard Rosenstein, he is a legend in the scuba diving world. Um, not bad to get all of the Scuba Diving Hall of Fame and all the awards and the Nogi Award for a Jewish boy from LA. No?
I was born in Borough Park,
Oh
but
my
I
God.
grew. I, but my parents had the wisdom to move to Los Angeles when I was 2 years old. So I literally grew up in Los Angeles.
Did your mom like that you started diving at all?
She wanted me to be a doctor.
Of course,
Uh,
of course. A doctor or a
no,
lawyer?
a doctor or a lawyer, yeah. I think they were, but at the time they were living in LA, and I had moved to Israel when I made the decision to open up a diving school. I I think they were okay with it. I don't know if it was their first choice,
But
but
the location of your diving school was unknown at the time. It was Egypt in Sinai right after the war, basically. Did I lose you? I
okay,
lost you.
sorry.
Yeah,
It, there was a break there.
it's okay. So
So,
you opened up a dive school in a location that back then, now, I mean, obviously now everyone knows Dahab is the Mecca of divers. Actually, they should just call Mecca the Dahab of, you know, everything else. But I mean, why go to Egypt, to Sinai? Like no one was there. There was nothing there.
so this few things to put the order in the right order. So, in 1970, at the age of 23, having just completed my own basic diving course in the United States, I came to Israel, and within 6 months, I opened my own diving school. 6 months after being certified, which today I don't think you can get away with.
Uh,
Um, and it was in Sydney Alley Beach in Herzliya on the Mediterranean shore. And anyway, I just started. I worked with a few young Israeli SEALs who had just finished their military service, and we started giving courses. And it was 50 years ago, and things were very, very different. Especially in Israel, there was one diving club in Eilat, aquasport on the beach. And actually, I started by initially wanting to be a branch of that school in Eilat, but as things turned out, I opened up my own school on the Mediterranean. But Sinai was just happening because, as you know, Israel took it over in 1967, but there was a war for 3 years, what they call the war of attrition, and there wasn't any roads or anything. It was pretty isolated and not so pleasant. In 1970, they finished a road that went down from Eilat to Sharm el Sheikh. Now, I'll take issue with your claim about Dahab because for the purists, Sharm is the Mecca
of course.
Red Sea.
I'm sorry, specifically the Blue Hole.
Okay, the Blue Hole is an attraction,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And many people dive there, and it's a great place. But the center of diving activity for the Sinai has always been Sharm el Sheikh. Once we set up base, right? Dahab is the Nueva and Dahab were places to visit along the way. But Ras Muhammad, if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, is
Yeah.
probably considered the most famous and probably the most wonderful dive site in the Sinai area of the Red Sea. I mean, that's
There
just my opinion.
there's a
Your
movie
people
on
can
YouTube. There's a movie on YouTube, a video on YouTube from Krov Menuhin. You
grow.
know him?
Yeah, he
So you
did it
probably
with me.
dove with him.
He dove with me.
He dove with you. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No,
He
no.
dove with you.
Again,
So,
my diving center was his base when he made the movie on Ras Muhammad.
but there is a movie of him um, on a beach with a little generator and a compressor, like a gas-based compressor. He's filling up a 15-liter steel tank,
Right.
and there's nothing on the beach. There's no one for miles. And he just
Right.
casually goes down to 85 meters on air in a single tank
Right.
alone.
It wasn't alone. It was with his wife Anne, he was married to at the time, and I I'm good friends with Krov, and when he made that movie, which his father, Yudi Menuchin, who was a world famous violinist, if you didn't know that, a very famous musician, made the music for the movie. And Krov came down to Sharm, and anyway, he worked out of my diving center when he made the movie, and he's a great guy and a dear friend. And it's a great movie, and it's probably the first movie that I know of. Maybe the Europeans have done something earlier on Ras Muhammad, specifically on Ras Muhammad.
Amazing.
And you're right. And you're right. In those years, you can go for miles and not see anybody else. You can go on a boat to a dive site and not see another boat. And that was the unique opportunity and beauty that we had to be so-called pioneers in this area, especially for scuba diving.
And you wrote an amazing book about your experiences and about your just life getting all of that together in Sinai in the 70s and 80s. Well, 82.
Okay, so excuse me just for 1 second, out of
Sure.
frame.
It's okay. Yeah. So, we have no problem doing.
Yeah.
We can sell anything we want on this podcast. We can do anything we want. No one tells us what to do.
So I wrote a memoir that had been in the oven for many years, called Treasure, Shipwrecks, and the Dawn of Red Sea Diving: A Pioneer's Journey. And basically, it's a memoir of the first decade of my work, because I started basically in 1970, and this chapter, this book, is like the beginning of several, which records the early years, the pioneering years, starting actually in 1968, when I had a unique experience and I discovered a gold treasure in the Mediterranean, which actually gave me the ability to start the diving center with whatever I got from that treasure. So that's the first chapter in the book. It talks about the gold treasure that I found in Caesarea. So my career started basically in the Mediterranean, but in those years, everybody wanted to get down to dive in the Red Sea. And you had to go through hell to get there, because the roads weren't completely finished. Sometimes you had to go through the center of the Sinai and then cut down from Suez. But it was like totally virgin. It was like you didn't see anybody. I was approached in 1972 to set up a diving center in Nueva, which was just beginning as a holiday village. That was the base camp for the road crew that built the road. Okay, the ones who built the road were based in Nueva. When they finished the road, they abandoned it, and a group of young Israelis came and set up the holiday village there. And then they wanted to have something to do, so they invited me to open up a branch of my school in Nueva, which I did in 1972. But as soon as we had a chance to really do some exploration, the road down to Sharm was open, and we dived all the way down, and we found, and it was the opinion of the divers we were diving with, that the farther south you go, like the Dahab, and then down to Sharm, and then finally to Ras Muhammad, it just got better all the way down. And I could go into the reasons for it, but there are reasons for it. So after a year in Nueva, I decided to move down to Sharm. There was nothing there at the time. It was a very small place. there was one motel, not even a hotel, and one like hostel, and that
Shacks on
was
the
it.
beach. Essentially, shacks on the beach.
Yeah, yeah. There was in the Nama Bay, which was the designated tourism center. There was it's actually funny. They brought down geodesic domes made of fiberglass. Everything was so temporary. Nobody knew what was going to be happening. They were still trying to negotiate a peace treaty and eventual withdrawal. So nobody wanted to really invest money. So everything was like there was the motel was the caravan because people were sleeping in literally little trailers that on the wheels were still there, and somebody had to leave. They just could drive it away. And and I had a little caravan that I was living in, like the size of a Volkswagen bus on the beach. And my first diving center there was an abandoned wooden train car, literally a World War One vintage train car with no floor. The floor was the beach sand, and we had a little compressor. And you mentioned Alex Shell. Alex Shell was my first employee at that
I
place. He was
remember
my
Alex
student.
Shell. He was a legend. He always had like 5 or 6 different dive masters walking around him trying to like get some wisdom in the late 90s in Aquasport in Eilat
Right.
with a
So he is
very
a
big
legend.
mask because his nose is tremendous. It's like a big nose,
So
big mask.
you could. He's a very handsome guy, a real specimen.
He's a
Um,
wonderful guy.
yeah. So he was my first student, actually. I taught him how to dive, and then he
Amazing.
became my assistant. Yeah. So it kind of dates me, I guess. And we're dear friends to this day. I just celebrated his 80th birthday with him in Eilat. I went down and took him out to dinner.
But I
He's a
guess he
great
doesn't
guy.
dive anymore.
You know, he doesn't dive professionally. It doesn't, I think maybe for his own pleasure, but he's in the water all the time. He's a water person, very much so. Anyway, we went down and set up this club in Sharm in a train car, and then we were open for business, trying to. It was a period where we really had to work hard to get people to come down, mostly Israelis. Mostly students from my diving school were coming down to do their open water work. Um, and then bang came the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So as soon as we were getting our feet on the ground, this is the story of the narrative of our life in those years it was like a roller coaster. As soon as you started to build something up, something happened, and you had to went back to base.
So wait, um, like you left in 1982, right?
Yes and no.
No. Okay.
The
Yes and no.
answer, so I was in Sharm from 1973, from that time I'm talking about, living there and finally with my wife and with children and raising a family. And in 1982, there was the Sinai withdrawal, the peace treaty, the Camp David peace treaty. The area returned to Egyptian sovereignty, and everybody had to leave, all the Israelis, except because of my American passport, they asked me to stay on with my business in Sharm. And I had a contract, actually, but I made the decision to not to stay in Sharm, to live, but I got a permission from them to open up a liveaboard business. So I had literally the second liveaboard that was working in the Red Sea called Fantasy. So if you wanted the timeline, I started the Sinai in 1972 in Nueva. 1973, I moved it down to Sharm. 1982, we sold the business to the Egyptian government, and we left. In 1983, I returned with a 85-foot liveaboard I called Fantasy One, and I started the liveaboard business in the Red Sea. And I continued with that liveaboard business. It was called Fantasy Cruises. until 1997. So I stayed another 15 years in Charm, not as my home, but as my work base. So I would commute back and forth, and we would leave either from Eilat or from Charm until, um, and then we, and then the Gulf War came, and we, so we had to leave the Red Sea. Where I went down to the Seychelles and pioneered scuba diving in Aldabra atoll in the Seychelles Islands, you know. So it spanned 25 years, my school and business, 27 years actually. And then I called it quits. It was getting too complicated, too political. And so I closed down the fantasy cruises, sold the boat, and shortly after that went into manufacturing diving equipment. First of the polio mask, which is the mask that protects the diver's ears with like ear cups and
I
stuff.
remember those.
Yeah, so I invented that. And then I started a company with my son called Fantasy Line, which making housing for compact cameras. And that I'm doing to this day. So this is kind of a timeline covering 50 years of involvement in diving.
And you still dive regularly.
I wouldn't say it any more regularly. I would say I still dive, not regularly. I mean, I used to go from 300-400 dives a year and slowly reducing it. And now I dive infrequently. You know,
When you say infrequently, most people, when they think about diving, they think about the 2 weeks a year that they go down to the Caribbean or go down to, from California, it would be going down to Mexico or going to Cancun, or in Israel, it would be, going to the Maldives, the big trip to the Maldives that they do, or something like that twice a year.
Most likely they'd be going to Eilat on a weekend if they wanted to
Exactly.
dive, but maybe once a year they would go on a trip somewhere abroad where Israelis can't even go diving anymore right now in the
So
Maldives.
they'll do 20 dives a year in Eilat. They'll go down for the weekend, do a couple dives, and come back.
Yeah.
And then they'll do 20 dives a year in Eilat, and then maybe another trip to like somewhere big, right? Palau,
Yeah, yeah,
Maldives,
wherever.
something like that.
There's
So,
several very good Israeli companies that you probably know about
yep.
that organize tours very professionally to great diving destinations. And that's when people have their perk once a year or twice a year, they could afford it. And there's planes leaving Israel at the time, it's not always
So
given a
do
given.
you dive more than that, or do you dive less than that now?
No, I dive about that. Okay,
Okay.
up until COVID, COVID was a big
Yeah, to
moment.
everybody.
Yeah. So I used to be the chief tester for the housings and the lights and the equipment that we manufacture.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime a new model would come out, I'd be down in Eilat with the team. I don't know if you know Boaz Samurai
Well, samurai.
or Noam Kortler. These are excellent Israeli underwater photographers, and we had a team, and we would test the equipment. And so I would be diving 50, 60 times a year easily until the COVID hit, and then things went upside down. And anyway, so my diving is much reduced. But I never even had a logbook, so I can't tell you.
So, so, so now, diving has changed in the last, years that you've been diving. I mean, you've been diving since you were 23 years old. You're pushing 80 now, I think. And so, I mean, 50 years of diving, what is, like, in the diving itself, what has changed in your opinion?
So I mean, technically, there's not. I mean, until the advent of technical diving and trimix and mixed gases and the closed circuit, which is a big difference, which is a big change. I'll agree. But up until that became really popular, There wasn't really great. I mean, things got, we went from the Fenzi or the Horseshoe, we went to the Scuba Pro vest, backpack type set. I mean, uh, there was no computers in those days. I mean, you had to use the tables and figure things out. So everything got more sophisticated, but basically the diving hadn't changed that much. Just became more popular. Diving tourism was a big deal because in the beginning it was just people basically diving where they were, and if you were in California, you dove in California. If you're from Florida, you dove in Florida, and then diving tourism started to kick in the 70s, just when we were starting. So that became a basis for a business, actually, diving tourism. Um, but except for the technical diving stuff, it hasn't really changed a hell of a lot. Just the equipment's got better. Underwater photography, which was a big push in diving, was very basic in the 70s. You had the Nikonos, which was this
I
actually
remember the
amphibious,
Mykonos.
yeah, yeah, which was a wonderful piece of equipment, by the way. But as soon as digital photography came in the late 90s, it was like made it affordable. That's why I got in at that time. I got into underwater photography equipment because I saw an opportunity with digital cameras, good ones, to make housings, and it became very affordable. So more and more people were taking pictures, and that was a motor that pushed diving tourism because people wanted to take pictures of their holidays and stuff like that.
And post it on Facebook. Of course, it's very important. Or else, how would people know that I'm a better than them if I don't post the picture, of a manta on Facebook and say I had the wonderful experience?
I think one of the besides diving being a healthy sport where you're out in nature and you're moving, and it's also a very social sport, and it's something that you want to share, whether it's with a friend or a group or a family. And I think that was the big, there was boom years in the 90s, I'd say, and into the 2000s, the millennium, where it was like that was the in thing to do, was to go out and take a holiday and like you say, record it with a camera and show your neighbors how cool you are. Um,
And
it,
there were
it, it
diving, there was like dive fashion, like people had dive
yeah, it became
fashion.
okay. So diving was very black in the beginning. I mean, it was black wetsuits, black this, everything. I mean, the scuba tanks were mostly like silver colored. They weren't even until the aluminum tanks came in, and then they had some coloration. But the wetsuits, I think when the women became more and more involved in diving, they wanted to make it attractive, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful addition, and and then the wetsuits all of a sudden became colorful, and the masks became colorful, and it was no longer just black. It was also the fashion, like you say, and then the dive bags and hats and all the paraphernalia. It became, it was a very cool thing. But in the beginning, it was a macho thing. In the beginning, it was spearfishing, and the diving courses were extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. I mean, today the diving courses are much, much more
Much
geared
easier,
to the mass.
much easier.
Yeah, yeah.
Diving
So
is
I did.
fun, 2.5 days, 2.5 days open water, another 2 days advanced open water. You can
Yeah,
do zero to hero in a week.
right. Yeah. Well, you could be. I think you get certified in 5 days or something like that, or
Yeah, yeah.
yacht, something like. I did
I
the
mean, in Israel, there are
YMCA.
rules. In Israel, there are actually rules about the length of the course, but in other places in the world, those rules don't exist.
Yeah, it varies. I've been once I came out of the Sinai and I got more involved in equipment in the after the millennium. I was going to a lot of trade shows promoting my products and also taking opportunities to go dive in different places in the world. So Israel is very structured. First of all, it's one of the few countries in the world that actually has a law. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a diving law, which sometimes can get a little too crazy. But I think Israel is a very structured country as far as scuba diving and instruction and safe. It really, when you look at the statistics, they do a good job. And you have to have diving insurance, and you have to have the proper licensing. And I've been to areas diving, and they never even asked to see my license. Yeah, okay, come go in the water,
No,
go
you
diving.
sign a waiver and you're done.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, it's you know, in the day, you can have a day of diving for 25, 30 bucks, rental equipment, all that. I was in Hawaii last year, in Kauai, and I went out for a day of diving on a little boat, they had, and it was like 250 or 300 bucks for a day of diving. And like I'm the type of guy who never paid for diving in my life because I always was able. But there, I just kind of walked into a shop and said I like to go diving, and they charged $250, $300 for two mediocre dives. Excuse me, and we were back at 2 o'clock on the dock.
Yeah.
So I had the experience, but I said to myself, boy, if we were charging 250, now we charged on our liveaboard. We had a very beautiful liveaboard, um, which was like 35 meters, called the Fantasy 2, which is now called the Pelagian, and it's working in Wakatobi Resort in Indonesia. We were charging $250, $300 a day, but that was for a floating hotel, meals, five
Yeah,
dives a day. Yeah.
it has become an expensive activity. It's not just a hobby, it's a hobby that's very expensive. I mean, for if you live on the east coast of the United States and you want to go diving, let's say in Florida, Mexico, Belize, let's say Honduras even, anywhere in the Caribbean, it's so obviously you have to fly out there and you have to pay for a hotel or a live aboard, and they charge through the nose because there's not after Corona, after COVID, not that many people were going out diving, and they have to stay in business, and a lot of businesses went under. The Bahamas, which is very famous for diving, just a lot of businesses are not doing that well. I think there's been some recovery, but it's very expensive to dive going out on a boat.
Do you know where the best diving in the Caribbean is?
Bonaire. Hans
Cuba.
Haas,
Cuba. Forget Hontas. Cuba.
forget
Pardon
Hans
the.
Haas.
No, first of all, I dove with Hontas.
Of
It was
course you did.
one of the great honors of my life to take him diving in the Red Sea. But and don't when he was on Curacao during World War II, and he
Yeah.
did diving. Yeah, and he's the great pioneer and a hero. So
You know,
no,
he's it, he's very interesting because he started when Cousteau was doing scuba on regulators. He was doing rebreathers, oxygen rebreathers, to like I think he was diving to like 9 or 10 meters regularly with these tiny little, I think 1 liter bottle
yeah,
horseshoe
his best
rebreathers.
with his wife Lotte was a beautiful, beautiful. They were the power couple, and and I think the purists in the business,
Yeah,
from my experience, you mentioned Krove Maneuver, and also is a very good friend of Hans Haas. The purists of business respect Hans Haas even more than, and he did more scientific papers and more.
I think he was more of a soul diver. He dove like he was more of the like you know and I think the Cousteau was more of like the famous guy, because he also had the backing of the French government. So I think there's a little bit. I'm not going to say there was a rivalry, but you can compare between the two of them. I think one of them was more serious, and the other one was more
Commercial.
showy. He was more of a show.
So Cousteau, and he deserves all the credit and honors that one could bestow on him. He was an excellent PR guy, the
Yes,
best.
yes,
And he popularized, I mean, let's face it, he popularized scuba diving to the masses. Hans Haas was, with Lottie sitting over on the side doing papers, doing exploration, doing and developing the rolling marine camera. If you didn't know that, the
yeah, yeah.
rolling marine, one of the first great underwater camera systems. It
I
was
think he took
hung.
it from a 16 millimeter gun camera from World War II fighters, right? Is that what he did? He put them in a box?
The Rolly Marine was based on the Rolleiflex camera, which was a six by no 2.25 big negative,
Yeah,
and he helped design the housing for it,
the
which they
housing.
call
Okay,
the
sorry.
okay. Anyway, both of them were giants and heroes, and
But wait, you say the words, both of them are giants and heroes, and here you sit, you are a giant and a hero. Like you have been doing this for your entire life. I mean, look, you started as a nice Jewish boy from the suburbs whose mother wanted him to be a lawyer or a doctor. And then you went out and you went right after a war, while there was still negotiating what was going to be, to the place where the war happened and continued going. Like basically, you said you had 6 months out of on your license at the time, and you have continued doing it, and you say like, I don't dive that much. You dive more than most people who call themselves divers, the people who wear the hats and the jackets all the time,
right,
who have the stickers on their cars. And you're pushing 80, and you're still very much involved in the diving community on a regular basis, like on a almost weekly basis. You have something that is interesting or some sort of opinion that is, I think, worthwhile. So you can't just say, "Oh, those guys, I dove with those guys." See, what you mean to say is those guys know you. Like you are a big name in diving, not just in Israel, which is Israel. Who cares? Like in the world. Rebreathers, you've done all the technical diving. You did deep air diving when it was still considered safe.
right, yeah, and did a lot of irresponsible things, and luckily I'm here to talk about them as well. I did discover the Dunraven shipwreck, which was a pretty big thing, was exciting.
Yeah,
Um, and so this year I was honored, greatly honored, beyond beyond honored, to receive the Nogi Award, which is the most prestigious award in
unbelievable.
the diving world, and in the distinguished service category. So Nogi has 5 categories. It has education, it has science, it has arts, which is mostly photography, it has ecology, and then it has a thing called distinguished service. It's like a lifetime achievement award, if you will.
Unbelievable. It's
And the predecessors who previously received it were Jacques Cousteau and Hans Haas. So I'm on that, at the bottom of that ladder right now, which is mind-boggling to me, and I'm just overwhelmed by the
I think
opportunity.
what's really cool is also that you regularly talk to and collaborate with Amos Nahum.
Yes, Amos is a dear, dear friend,
He's crazy
and we have
in the
we,
in
we
the
have a
best way.
he, yeah. So we have a very funny history. So I was an American who came to Israel, and Amos was an Israeli who went to America. And when we met back in the day, and that's when he was just starting out in a company called La Mer, which is his first attempt at diving tourism, did very well. And I provided the services for Amos's groups in Charm. And we were both, I would just say, we were two egos that were sometimes clashing at the time because we were we were on our way up in the world, so to speak. So I would say we had a shaky beginning, but over 45 years, we've been friends. And he was just here. I mean, he was just here in Israel now, and we were together. Um,
Isn't he
he
taking pictures of like polar bears now or like
he's
wolves in
amazing.
the Arctic?
So one of the benefits of my career is I've had the opportunity to work with the very best of the best of underwater photography. David Dubélé on his first assignment for National Geographic was with me and Jeannie Clark in Sharm el Sheikh. Amos, Stephen Frink, I mean, Grove Menu when you mentioned, Jack McKinney, Chuck Nicklin, Stan Waterman. I mean, the list is endless. Because I was the person at the place at the time that if you wanted to go diving in Charm for the most part, you ended up diving with me, and I learned from every one of them, and it was a cumulative process. I I just want to mention two things that I'm particularly proud about, and the first is that the Sinai historically was a battleground. I mean, it was a place where armies of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia were marching back and forth and up and down and fighting battles, getting to Egypt and getting to Canaan or Judea or wherever. And battles were going on. That's what the Sinai. We were the generation that turned that historical battleground into an international playground. We laid the seeds of what there is today. Not that I'm particularly excited about what there is today, because I think it's overdone. But I'm just saying we were the ones who turned this into a playground, into a place where
Absolutely, and you can still see it today that every dive center in Eilat still has a Jeep, which is not necessary anymore because we have good roads. What was the second thing? Wait, you said two things. What was the
two
second
things.
thing?
Okay. The second thing is that we were very extreme in our desire to preserve and protect the nature of the Sinai and the Red Sea. And this was an Israeli initiative. And from the get-go, there was the Nature Reserves Authority that was with rangers, and I became a volunteer ranger, and we were making sure that as best as we possibly could, I'll say, that there was no spearfishing, there was no coral collecting, there was no shell collecting, and we were on the scene, we were on the spot, we were with our boats, we were with our jeeps and driving along, and so they had a professional crew, and then they had volunteers like myself, which had the authority to take down license plates, to take away corals or shells that we found and put it back in the sea. And this was very, very strong, and I'm proud of that. But as we got to the transition period, and I was involved, I was the representative of Israeli diving at the bilateral tourism talks in Cairo, and I gave a presentation to the Egyptian government and the Israeli representatives who were there, and gave a slideshow and talked about the need, first of all, to keep the area available and open for diving tourism and tourism in general, but also to maintain the laws of nature protection. I was instrumental in turning Ras Muhammad into a nature reserve, a park. And Ras Muhammad then became the first national park and nature reserve in Egypt, the first. And that was due to work of groups of us like Dr. Eugenie Clark, David Duvalier, myself, some people from Europe who were very involved and lobbying for maintaining Ras Muhammad as a nature reserve, and we succeeded. And
That's
I'm very
amazing.
proud. Yeah,
I mean,
very proud.
look, I'm very proud that I'm very proud that I got to talk to you today. I got to tell you, this has been amazing, and your story. First of all, everyone should buy your book, and everyone should buy your camera housings, of course. But mostly, you should buy the book and look at your wonderful bird pictures, treasure shipwrecks and the dawn of the Red Sea diving. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time today, Howard. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and if you don't mind, and this you don't have to have particularly in the recording, but
Here, let me turn off the recording, and we